In this video, we're going to take a quick tour of CafeX AI and see how we can apply it in a couple of use cases. We're going to walk through two demo scenarios in this video. In the first scenario, we're looking at the workstation of a contact center agent handling a claims inquiry. We'll look at how CafeX Live Assist can leverage an AI agent to augment the user and reduce the time taken to process the inquiry while always using the current training material and business rules. The second scenario will show you how CafeX Data Studio can be used to extract data from various disparate data sources, process it in an AI-enhanced pipeline, and apply machine learning to predict the likelihood of customer churn, resulting in an executive dashboard. What we're looking at here is the contact center agent workstation. Here, as a call comes in to the contact center agent, the first thing the agent has to do is work out the date that the person is inquiring about. This could be why the claim wasn't paid or why it was only partially paid. The agent needs to use their tacit knowledge to work through the list of benefit plans, which extends to 3 pages, looking at the effective date and end date, as well as the benefit plan code to determine why the claim might not have been paid. When they've worked out that there was a benefit plan active at the date, they then have more data to look at further down the page. There's a lot of data that the agent needs to parse in their heads, and a lot of tacit knowledge about the current business rules and the current training that the agent had to go through. What we can do using CafeX Live Assist is we can ask an AI agent to help the agent on the call to answer the question. Here, the AI agent has access to all of the same data that the user has access to. All of the data on the page is available to the AI agent as context. Here we can see that the AI agent has correctly summarized the details on the page, and they've boiled the benefit plans down to the 2 that were applicable on the given date. It's also told us there was no third-party liability on the data service. We can now ask follow-up questions, either by typing the message or again by using a prompt that we've determined is likely that the agent's going to want to take. Here we can ask very simply, was the member eligible? And again, the AI assistant will look at the data and it will give us the determination that yes, the member was eligible for Medicaid, as well as giving the reasoning for it. In this case, they had applicable benefit plans and no TPL coverage. What we've now done is we've reduced the time taken to process this data by the human operator in a significant way. What I'll now do is move to the system that powers this interaction. Here we're looking at the definition of the AI agent that drove that interaction. If I zoom in on this section, the key thing that we need to start with is the definition of the model we're going to use for the agent. In this case, I'm using a publicly available model from OpenAI, hosted in their cloud. We then give it the input, which is coming from chat, and tell it where the output goes, in this case, back to chat. In all cases in CafeX AI, we can also drive this from an API if we want to fully automate the operation. At the point where we have chat input, an agent, and chat output, what we essentially have is ChatGPT. We can ask the agent questions and we can get responses. But in order to make the agent tailored towards the use case in question, we have to give it a couple of more bits of information. We give it instructions and we give it tools. If we follow the instructions line, we can see that the prompt comes from a couple of different places. Firstly, we know there is training material that the agent will need to know in order to answer this question. There are 3 different files that we've loaded in so the agent has this available to them. The other thing that makes up the prompt is the data that was available to the agent on the screen. The contact center agent could see this information on the screen when the AI agent appeared, and all of that is made available to the AI agent as the context to answer the question. The other thing we can do is we can build up tools for the AI agent. In this case, we've given it a couple of custom tools which will help it parse the exact same data that was parsed earlier on. In doing this, we can make sure that the response from the agent is properly tailored towards the use case in question. In this scenario, we were using one of the main language models from OpenAI. We can also use language models from other providers. All of the main SaaS models are available. Plus, you can choose a custom model. This can be any model that's hosted behind an OpenAI style API, and it can also be a specially trained small language model from CafeX Model Central. When training a small language model, you can make sure that you don't end up with hallucinations that you can end up with in large language models. The model can also be trained with implicit knowledge of all of your business rules and all of your training, so that you don't have to pass them in as part of the context. What I'm now going to show you is how we can extend the agent to build up some more complexity in it. If I start over here, then this bit should be familiar from the previous example. Again, we have an agent. In this case, the language model is a specially trained small language model from CafeX. The output is an API output in this scenario. If we trace where the input to the agent comes from, in this scenario, we're following a RAG pattern. The request comes in from an API, and then as well as being passed into the prompt, that same message is passed through a vector database where it can perform a search for similar documents. The search results and the original query get passed through to form the input for the agent. We then pass some tools into this agent. What we can do with CafeX AI and the Agent Studio is we can use anything as a tool for an agent. In this scenario, we're using another agent as a tool for the first agent. Where the first agent was using a small language model hosted within CafeX AI, this agent is using a model from OpenAI. This shows us how we can mix and match agents hosted in different locations, trained on different data, in order to facilitate getting the best response we can. In this case, we're using the large language model to parse the request to determine which tools are needed in order to get the correct answer. If we look at the tools for this agent, we're then passing in two specialized small language models to this agent. These small language models can be trained on different data and perform different functions. The large language model will use the descriptions available for the small language models to determine which one is needed in order to answer the question. If multiple are needed, then the large language model will call down to multiple small language models to build up the answer. The small models can themselves use tools. In this case, we've passed in some custom logic to help this one parse the benefit plans. The other thing we can show in this example is the other tool, which applies some guardrails to the response. In this case, we're using a small language model in a language model as a judge type of scenario. This is a specially trained small language model hosted on CafeX, and it has access to the business rules that have been configured within the application. This allows us to apply deterministic business rules as well as the specialized language model when determining if the generated response is appropriate to be returned to the user. By applying these guardrails, we can ensure that no response goes out that contradicts company policy. That was the first demo scenario. We saw a contact center agent workstation where the user was mentally working through a large set of data and applying tacit business rules to determine whether the caller was eligible for service and why their claim may not have been paid. We saw how we can apply language models and agents to simplify and speed up the outcome by using CafeX Agent Studio and CafeX AI. In the second demo scenario, we're going to look at the use case where a user runs a SaaS operation and they want to analyze their user data to determine customer health and make a prediction on the likelihood of customer churn. To achieve this, we'll be pulling in data from disparate data sources, We'll process it using CafeX Data AI. We'll build a machine learning model for it, and ultimately visualize it using CafeX Data Viz. This is the CafeX Data Studio, and on the left we can see 5 different data sources that come into this pipeline. The first data source is customer data, and this might be pulled in from your CRM. We're then pulling in some runtime data from the application, and then some sentiment data from your contact center phone, contact center chat, and X or Twitter. All 5 of these sets of data are from disparate sources, and they're heterogeneous. They don't look the same. What we can do is we can apply an AI enhanced processing step. If we look inside this one, this shows the power of CafeX Data AI when applied to data sets. Here we can see 2 disparate sources of data. We've got the runtime data and we got the customer data from the CRM. Because we're using this data as training data for a machine learning algorithm, we've also included a column which says whether the customer churned. This column wouldn't exist when you run through it in runtime with real customer data for producing forecasts, but we do need it to build up the training model. What we can now see is how with just natural language we can ask the language model to join the 2 data sets. If we look at the output, we can see now we have the runtime data here, and at the end we got the CRM data. The way the language model does this is it parses the metadata of the input data sets, and it produces a code snippet to perform the operation. That code is run through in real time, which then means you always have a procedural operation, and it's always going to produce the same result. Your actual data is not running through the language model to perform this operation. If we look back at the dashboard, we can then see the data set that came out of this AI assistant step. Within the Data Studio, whenever you have a data set, you can use it downstream in further operations, or you can export it for use in external systems. If we look at our sentiment data, you can see in this scenario, we do both. We're combining the sentiment using the same AI enhanced process. We then export that data to a database for us to use externally, and we use it downstream in the data pipeline. If we look at this step, you can see we can now perform some more advanced operations on the data. We do it in the same way we did earlier. We ask in natural language, the language model, to perform some operations. In this case, we're going to replace some of the columns. Instead of being absolute values, we can use percentages. And we can also augment the data by adding a new column. In this case, we're going to add a license band column, which is a proxy for the number of licenses that the customer has. If we expand this data, we can see on the end, we now have that license band column added to it. If we go back to the pipeline, we now have the data that's ready for the machine learning step. The machine learning step is applied very simply. You tell Data Studio what data set you want the machine learning to run on. We tell it which column we're trying to predict. In this case, it's that churned column that we added from our CRM records that you can see on the end of the data here. And we give it the problem type. In this case, it's either true or false, and we're going to use a binary classification to determine that. If you go back to the dashboard, what you can then see, the output from that step, we got the output data set, you got an audit showing how the machine model is built up. You can see various charts showing the effectiveness of the machine learning model and the model itself, and some more data too. The one that's important to us right now is the output data set. In here, you can see it's added a prediction column, as well as the probability of being 0 and the probability of being 1 false and true. With that data available, we can now process that just like we can with any other data. In this case, we're now building back up the original data set that we passed in and taking the prediction from the output data set. Again, we don't need to write any code to do this. We can enable normal developers to be data scientists as well by using the power of a language model in order to drive it. When we've built up our prediction data set, we can then export it to use in external systems. Another thing we can do with CafeX Data Studio is we can ask the language model to analyze the data for us and deliver some insights. This isn't part of the processing pipeline, but this is an extra step that we can perform to inspect the data that we're working with. You can see that we can ask questions that result in textual answers. You can also ask it to draw you charts, in this case a distribution curve for the density of the number of licenses. This is a very powerful tool to let people gain insight from data without needing to have a data science background or resort to a complex data analysis platform or large Excel files. The next thing we can do with CafeX Data AI is we can visualize your data on dashboards. Here we can see the licenses at risk as determined by our machine learning model. We can also subdivide that by license type and provide multiple other visualizations on it as well. If we go to the sentiment tab, what we can also see is more advanced visualizations, in this case tracking sentiment over time from our different sources. We can see here, with red being bad and green being good, that we had a very bad patch on the phone channel at the start of the year. As that improved up to December, we then started seeing a deterioration in our chat channel. This might be that we've moved our best chat agent over to the phone channel in order to try to improve the quality there, leaving us with a deficit in the chat channel. So by adding advanced visualizations like this, we can now see patterns emerging that might have been more difficult to expose in other visualizations. We appreciate that most of our customers will have existing BI solutions, but we find that CafeX Data Viz provides most of the required solutions for most of the use cases in order to get very quick visualizations without having to branch off to a different system. Those are the two use cases I wanted to talk to you today about. We've seen the AI assistant helping the contact center agent, and then we've seen how we can use CafeX Data AI to process incoming data from disparate data sources in order to provide advanced learning and visualizations of that data. Thank you very much for watching the video today. If you have any more questions, please view our website or contact us at info@cafex.com. Thank you.